Hello, my name is Tomi Akatunde, and I'm the founder of Modern Maya. Modern Maya is a platform that helps Black moms get the answers to their motherhood, life, and career questions through content and community. I like to call Modern Maya Black Mom Google. So the hope is if you have a question, the site will provide an answer for you. And these days, one of the big questions that the community has been asking about has been, what does back to school look like in the age of a pandemic? And so we created this series of events called Mama AMA, Ask Me Anything, where we gather experts in different categories to answer your questions about what back to school looks like these days. And today we're talking about alternative learning options. So your homeschooling, unschooling, learning pods, just whatever questions you have about those topics, feel free to leave them in the chat box. A lot of people already sent in questions through the RSVP. We're gonna make sure we hit all of those questions and get you answers. But before we get started, I want to introduce you to our moderator, Taishia Ingram, who will be leading today's conversation. Taishia is a writer, entrepreneur, and advocate for the liberation of Black women and families. By day, she works as a brand storyteller in beauty, health, and wellness. And by night, she pens essays on identity, self-directed education, and the business of freelancing. Her words have been featured on Motherly, Vox, Successful Black Parenting, The Startup, and more. You can find her managing a blended family of schoolers, unschoolers, and young people whose paths are yet to be discovered in Philadelphia. You can learn more about her work at taishiashante.com. Hey, Taishia.
Hey, Tomi.
I'm so glad to have you moderating for us. I'll let you take it away from here.
All right. So thanks again, Tomi, for putting this together. I think as all of us are, trying to get through this year, no matter how we school, resources like this are so important for the community. So I really appreciate you putting this together and having us on. And I'm really excited to talk about all things homeschooling tonight with amazing Black mothers and homeschoolers. And, at some point, even as no matter how long we've been doing this, we've all kind of been first time alternative schooling. So we know how difficult that can be. So hopefully, you guys will leave with feeling a little bit more comfortable and equipped to venture into this new year. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce the panelists. We have Darcel White. She is a single mom of 3, coffee enthusiast, and style junkie. She's also an asthma, autism, and food allergy advocate. She is the head of a child-centered unschooling family making memories in Ohio. Thanks, Darcel, for joining us. We also have Eva Wilson. So Eva is a wife, mother of 3, author of 2 children's books, illustrator, speaker, graduate of Howard University School of Law, the owner and editor of the award-winning website SocaMom.com, homeschooling advocate, and the founder of the Soca Mom Summit. While she was a full-time law student, she homeschooled her 3 children and continued to write and speak, whether it was reading her law assignments before events while covering the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation's annual legislative conference, speaking at the National Conference of Negro Women's Conference between classes, or studying for exams while on a blogging trip to the Caribbean. Eva found a way to make it all work. She is currently working on a podcast and book about homeschooling, and she has a Facebook group for those frustrated with the pursuit of homeschooling perfection. Thank you, Eva, for being with us tonight. And then we have Nwamaka. She's a graduate of the University of California, Berkeley, and University of Chicago, and professionally serves as the chief of staff to City of Houston Councilmember Carolyn Evans Shabazz. She's also the CEO, that's Child Care Extraordinaire, I like that, of Nannyland, a company that founded that provides on-site childcare services for events, and has since pivoted with the pandemic to help parents create learning pods. But most important role in development has taken place in parenthood. When she's not pouring into her little human to develop her into an amazing adult, she enjoys working out and food preparing. So thank you guys again. I'm really excited to talk to everyone. I think I'm a homeschooling parent as well, and I unschool, but I love hearing different perspectives. So yeah, we're just going to get started. So Darcel, you're an unschooler. Eva, you homeschool, and Nwamaka, you are starting learning pods. So I know with the pandemic and crisis schooling, there are so many different terms coming out, and I know people are getting a little confused and don't really know which is which. So I would love to hear from each of you, kind of just explaining what your method of homeschool is and what that looks like. And we can start with Eva, because you do the traditional homeschool. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that, starting there.
Well, first, I was traditional homeschooling. Let me tell you that, because I moved to Chicago and decided I was going to navigate the Chicago public school system. So that was my first year of having kids in a public school setting. But before that, I was doing traditional homeschool where I was creating a curriculum. You can buy one, but I created one. I just went online and got the books that were set up in a way that worked with my teaching style and with the kids' learning style. And we did a lot outside, right? So we did a lot of museums. We did a lot of field trips with other families. It wasn't necessarily a co-op or anything like that, but we participated in a lot of kind of group activities that other homeschoolers did. So it was much different from the crisis version that we have now. I homeschooled my oldest, he's 21 now, up to his senior year, and then he graduated and went to college. And the other two, they were homeschooled up to 8th grade and 7th and 8th grade, because they went to school for 8th and 9th grade. So it was very different to what we're doing now. It is mostly learning what your child, how they work. You can set your own schedule. You can, add things in that your kids enjoy. I have a son who's really into cars, so we did a lot of that. My daughter, they were into business, so we did business and things like that. It wasn't just the math, reading, science, things like that. So that's kind of the freedom that homeschool gives you. You can teach lessons based on what your kid is interested in, and you can also kind of decide what your day is going to be like.
Right. So that actually kind of leads me into, I would love to hear from you, Darcel, because that's the kind of unschooling approach. So I would love to hear how that is for you guys.
So we don't use a curriculum unless the kids specifically request it. And I don't just wait for them to ask me what they want to do. I do that sometimes, but most of the time I am the facilitator. So before COVID, we would do museums and co-ops. We still now, with COVID, use the library since they reopened resources. And even though our homeschool co-op is still, they started meeting again to go to like parks and things, we're not doing that. So I've had to get a little more creative. Like Eva said, we do a lot outside. We can hike pretty much year round if we wanted to, but we normally stick to the warmer months for that. And I take like a child-led interest approach, I guess. Like my son, he loves space, and he recently started getting into DNA and things like that. So he searches these YouTube videos for things on space, and he wakes up talking about the solar system and black holes and things like that. And like right now I'm in the process of finding him a solar system kit. And so far, nothing we've come across he's really interested in. So I think we're going to have to go to the store and let him pick the supplies himself and design his own, which is totally fine. He can be as creative as he wants to be. And just really like meet them where they are and see where their interests lead to. Nothing is done really in the typical way. So I don't think of their learning in terms of subjects. I do look for the learning in everything that they do, because I believe that kids they're naturally curious, they're learning all the time. So I just try to do my best at facilitating that and making sure I stay connected with them and learning alongside them. It is easier said than done sometimes. and we have our challenges, but for the most part, we have a lot of fun together and just trying to keep track of their different interests because they're all different ages, 15, 13, and 10, and with special needs and things like that. So just doing the best I can, meet them where they are, and have fun and be flexible is it's like one of the most important things I think that we do with our unschooling.
Right. One thing you mentioned, the homeschool co-op. So my family also was in a homeschool co-op before the pandemic, and with learning pods being like popular now, like this new growing trend, I think that people didn't realize like we had co-ops and things like that before everything. But I think that it's cool that like learning pods are now becoming like more mainstream and people are learning about that. So Amaka, I would love to know about learning pods and explain a little bit about how that works and what you're doing with them.
Sure. So I'm the host home for a learning pod for my 4-year-old daughter, Ure. We've had our learning pod for 11 weeks. We kind of refer to it as a learning pod, a quarantine squad, a micro school, but it has a name. It's called Black Girl Magic School. It's 5 little girls, ages 3 and 4. We started in the beginning of June. And they school at my home from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. for what we call like their summer exploration period, right? And real school starts next Monday, where the hours will change from 9 to 5. Some people may ask, why are the hours so long, right? Traditionally, when you homeschool, we know that kids need like an hour or 2 of schooling a day, probably. However, a lot of the parents were essential workers. And so while my home is the host home, I am not the host teacher. We were blessed to be able to hire their actual classroom teacher from their school. All of these girls went to school together. They went to the same private Christian school that closed on March 16th due to the pandemic. And so we hired their teacher, and she comes into my home and she teaches them. But I would say the difference between the amazing school that they went to and our learning pod or our quarantine squad or our micro school, we'll just call it Black Girl Magic School because that's the name of it. The difference between their school and Black Girl Magic School is the amount of flexibility that we have as parents and the amount of flexibility the kids have as learners and the teacher has as a teacher. You can't beat that ratio. We live in Houston. You can't beat that ratio of learners to teacher at a St. John's, at a Kincaid, at an Audi International. You can't beat it. And the flexibility is so important because it truly allows us to cater to the needs of each individual girl and to bring in and teach them whatever it is that they want to learn and that we want them to grasp. So while their teacher is still focusing on things like handwriting, right? And learning their sight words and being able to spell and being able to read and being able to do mathematics. We had a week where we focused on racism and teaching the girls about racism. And we get to select all the books that they read, and the girls get to select the books that they want to read. And so out of that week, one night, as I was putting my daughter to bed, she said, Mommy, I'm still going to be a doctor, but I'm also going to be an abolitionist. Because one of the books, or one of the people that they spent the week learning about was Harriet Tubman. And so things like that, I lead 2 specials every single week with the girls, where we do a multitude of things. Last week, we had a lesson on human anatomy, where they learned about lots of their body parts. They learned from the brain to the bladder, and they were able to make Play-Doh models of the brainstem, their trachea, their kidney, their heart. And so out of that, now this week, the girls have been saying, instead of saying, I have to use the bathroom or the ladies' room, they're saying, I think my kidney formed pee and it's in my bladder and I have to go. So just different things like that. They get to take cooking. They love the air fryer because they've had cooking lessons. We do lots of, walks around the neighborhood and things like that. And so it allows us lots of flexibility. And as a result, I then went ahead and added this cadre of service to my company, Nannyland, which already provides on-site sitter services for events where people provide the space and we provide the safe fun. But I know how blessed I am as a single mom, as an essential worker working a very busy job supporting an entire district of constituents. It's super important to me to meet the needs of my daughter. And it wasn't sustainable. It's not normal for me to work, to teach, and to parent all within the same hours. And it was nice and fun and cute in March when I was like, because I come from an education background, I'm like, this is so great. I've always wanted to do this, teach my daughter all day. And then I was staying up all night to do my work for my council member. And then by April, I was like, I'm not going to make it. And by May, it was like, okay, am I choosing to teach her today or am I choosing to do my work? And so I did have to figure out a solution that met her needs. And like I said, it's just a huge blessing that we have been able to create this learning pod. And as parents, we get to decide the 2 specials a week with the girls' input. And, you know, one day they take a nap and the next day they're enjoying playing outside so much in our Houston heat that they don't want to take a nap. And that's okay. And that's the beauty of our learning pod and having so much flexibility. At school, nap is a pretty, hard start and stop. Playtime is a pretty hard start and stop. And in my home, which is their school location where they have dedicated learning spaces away from, I guess, my adult spaces, where there's just flexibility to kind of go with the flow and see what they're feeling and truly meet their needs for that day. So that's how our learning pod functions. Black Girl Magic School.
Yeah, I absolutely love Black Girl Magic School. I have a daughter, she'll be 2, and I'm trying to get her in your Black Girl Magic School.
Everybody is. I keep telling them we don't have any vacancies. You have to take a vote as parents to let someone else in. We had 4, and then we let in another one of their class buddies, and we are honestly at capacity. I wish I could take every little kid, but we just can't.
We're gonna have to expand, okay? We're gonna have pods popping up all around because we need that. But so it sounds like you came into alternative schooling specifically because of the pandemic that hit. So, so Darcel and Eva, I would love to know a little bit about your experience in traditional school and what made you guys really come into deciding to homeschool your children. I know that a lot of parents right now from last year kind of are just trying to figure out their way. And then there are parents who have, at least, I've known people who have homeschooled last year and now kind of like, that was a crisis situation, but I'm kind of interested in this new thing because I found that it's better, or I found easier ways, or it works better for my family. So I would love to hear from you 2 about how your traditional school experience was, and then what made you come over to try homeschooling.
I can start. So I was the parent that as soon as they can get to school, they are going to school. So my youngest was in school by 3 because they would take her. And so uniform was too big. I'm sorry, I don't care. You've got to go. Okay. So that's where I started. Everybody go to school. Well, you don't know because most kids, they don't start till 5 or something like that. So you don't really know how your kid compares to other children or how they'll fit into the educational system. You just assume if you fit in, they're going to fit in as well. So I went ahead and sent her, and then she just started learning just faster than I ever expected. My 2 older children went at the regular age. So I didn't know what to expect with her. I pretty much thought it was going to be like extra daycare or that kind of a thing. She wanted to go with her brothers. So I sent her in August. By September, she comes back reading. And I'm like, okay, well, that's cute. It's fine. That means I don't have to really, she can entertain herself. That's fine. And then around October, she starts to get anxiety. So she was in a kindergarten 1st grade class at 3. And she's learning everything. She's keeping up with everything. Everyone thinks it's so cute. But then you look at her fingernails and she's bitten them down to where it's bleeding, right? So I took her to the pediatrician for her checkup, and she's like, yeah, you shouldn't have anxiety at 3. Like, these aren't things that they should care about. And also, you were talking about the nap time is kind of flexible. Well, that's not how it works in a school. So she would have nap time, but a 3-year-old needs to sleep. So I would come in and, I'm looking around, where is she? Everybody else is ready to go. All the kids are out, and, where's my little person? And she is in the principal's office, because I go into the principal's office looking for her, and he has put together 2 little chairs and put her nap time blanket over the thing and set up a place for her to sleep, because she was just overwhelmed with the amount of information that she was getting in a traditional school setting. So it wasn't that she wasn't able to keep up. That was the problem, was that she was able to keep up, but emotionally she couldn't handle all of that. So the next year they say, oh, she can go to like the 3rd and 4th grade class. And I'm thinking she won't have any fingers left if she goes into the 3rd and 4th grade class. And, she was at the age where she was small, but still kind of competitive. So she says, well, I'm thinking if I don't move her ahead, she's going to feel like she did something wrong. So if I keep her back and her brother moves ahead, it's not going to pan out too well. So I start looking around for public school programs, private school, anything that will take her. Because again, I didn't come from a homeschool background. I went to very traditional schools. So I'm thinking that really is the only thing that you can do. So then my husband was very involved in the church. So he knew a lot of homeschooling families. I'm still like, I'm not doing that. So he was like, no, just talk to him. It'll be fine. Just talk to him. So I'm like, okay, well, that's pretty cool. Not taking everybody out. If she can't go, that's fine. She can come home. We worked in an office together. So we got a larger office so she could have her own space and with her books and things like that. She said, okay, we'll bring that one home. The other 2, you all need to stay where you are. You're doing perfectly fine where you are. So then eventually, and she kind of just did her own thing, because once they can read, I think that's another thing that people who are starting to homeschool, they're like, how am I going to keep them entertained all day? Once you get them to read or be able to navigate computers and other learning tools, iPads, things like that, it's not really that intensive, especially if you have somebody who's kind of a self-starter, and she is. So eventually my other 2 came home. One, because he was having issues with math. He could read anything. But the way that traditional school is set up, math and science kind of go together. And he was doing really, really well in science, really well in reading, but then math was not up with everything else. And when I talked to the principal, they said, we don't really see this. Those math and science go together. Literature and languages, they usually go together. So I said, all right, well, I'll bring that one home. My middle son, smart as a whip, loves math. And I'd say, okay, so it's time to read. He's like, nah, I don't want to do that. And the teachers wouldn't make him. They said, well, he's cute and he's nice. And they were mostly focused on him having enough snacks. So they would bring him snacks. Like it was very difficult to override this kind of thing. So eventually everybody came home. I had no idea what I was doing. I had looked up different curriculums and stuff like that. And then I finally said, there was more of a seasoned homeschooler. She was really, really great. I think she had like 7 or 8 kids. One was my oldest son's age. She had all down to infants. She had some that had graduated and gone on to college, some gone to the military. She had this, large kind of wealth of knowledge. And she said, I guess maybe looking at me, she could tell I couldn't manage. She said, there's this thing called K-12 that you can do. They give you the books. They give you the teacher. They give you everything. I think you should start there. So I started there, and it kind of it let me know what I wanted to do. And that's the really cool thing about homeschooling, virtual schooling, unschooling. You have that flexibility to say, I'm going to take charge of my child's education and see what works for me and for them. So the setup worked for me, I guess, because I'm more of a traditional type person. But my kids were like, we don't like it. We want to, Like I might want to do math in the evening and do English in the morning because I like to read when I get up. And that's not the way that K-12 was set up. They had certain learning times for certain things. So we eventually got out of that, went to traditional homeschooling, and it was really more about making sure that they got what they were supposed to get as far as the school system, what they wanted them to learn, and with the flexibility, they could also kind of weave in the things that they were most interested in that made homeschooling fun.
I love that story. And one thing I just wanted to point out was like your trajectory, right? So I feel like a lot of parents right now, they're like ready to jump in and they want to be like right where you're at, like coming from homeschooling out of nowhere, the pandemic. And it's like, we all don't start here. Some of us start as in cyber school or virtual school. And it's kind of like just having that time that it takes, you know, to figure out your child and figure out what you want to do, what works for you. I think that that's really helpful for people to hear that, like, you didn't start out where you're at. Like, you build up there to that. So Darcel, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with traditional school and then how you journeyed over to homeschooling?
So my three have always been homeschooled. Outside of my 13-year-old, when she was 9, decided she wanted to try traditional school, and I open enrolled her into a neighboring district, and I would drive her, pick her up, and she lasted about 4 months. And I had that moment where she's like, you know, she had mentioned it a couple years before, and I was just like, oh, okay, you know, she didn't bring it up again. This time she was adamant and like, you know, you want to go? All right. So she went, and I picked her up one day, and I come in my room and she's written me a note, and she says, I think I want to come back home, but I don't know what to do. Can you decide? And I told her, I can't decide for you. You decided to go, so it's got to be your decision if and when you come back home. I said, you have about 100 or so days left in the year. If you want to finish it, you can. If you want to come back home, you can. It's 100% up to you. You take as long as you need to decide. So it took her about a week or so, and then she said, I want to come home. And I asked her why, and she said, I noticed changes in her anyway, and I didn't say too much to her because she was enjoying going at first, but it wasn't long after she started going that she really was starting to come down on herself because she wasn't getting the grade she thought she should get. So, and she always felt like, she's like, all we do, she's like, it's tests. It's so much testing. Everything is a test. We read, we have to take a test. We do this spelling thing, then we got to take a test on that. She's like, and I come home and it's just study for more tests. She's like, all I have is worksheets and tests. And she was just really, I didn't like who she was becoming. She wasn't self-confident anymore. She was just so drained and down on herself. And so when she came back home, I put her back in the co-op we were going to, and she's been home ever since. But my journey to even get to that point, my oldest, who is 15 now, at the time she was 3, and we were living in Minnesota, and I felt like she wasn't talking as much as she could have or should have been. So I had early childhood come and test her, and they's like, you know, it wouldn't hurt to put her in our program. It's free here. And I was like, okay, cool. So got her little backpacks and supplies. The bus came and picked her up. I was married at the time, and we were able to go up to the school whenever we wanted, and we could watch her through the glass. And I liked it. It was for speech mostly and some occupational therapy. And she, it was like 10 students, a teacher, and then 2 assistants. And she was doing really well. She was talking more. She was handling things better at home. And then she was getting ready to turn 4, and we went in for an IEP, and they said she's going to have to go to a class with 25 kids now and one teacher. And I said no. And they're like, well, that's the way it has to be, because she's going to have to get to that point eventually anyway. And I said, but she's not going to do well. I know my daughter, and that's not going to work for her. Is there any other option that you have? And they were adamant. They said, no, this is how it's going to be. And so I said, okay, then she's coming back home. And my neighbor had asked me, she's like, have you heard of unschooling? And I was like, what is that? And I said, what is that? She gave me this book by John Holt called Learning All the Time. And I still recommend it because I was like, man, back then, some people had a grasp on how kids learn. And it just blew me away. And I was like, so you mean to tell me all these things we've been doing, playing blocks and talking about colors and going exploring nature and museums, like she's learning more than I think by doing all of this. I'm like, this is crazy. And I was one of those people, I said I'd never homeschool because I thought homeschoolers were weird. And that's all I knew. I mean, that's all I saw. So I didn't, you know what I'm saying? I was just like, sit at the kitchen table all day long with this book and you don't have friends. And I believed all the myths and stereotypes of homeschoolers. So I was like, that we will not be that. And that book was life-changing for me. And I was like, okay, let's give it a year. She's not even school age yet. They didn't have to start till they were 6. So like, she's about to be 4. What's it gonna hurt to try for a year? And we did, and then just kept on. And we got really well connected with a homeschool community there. And then we ended up moving to Virginia Beach, found another homeschool community there, probably one of the biggest we've ever been a part of, because we were in Virginia Beach. So they had the Southern Hemisphere homeschool group and then the Northern one on the other side of the water. And about twice a year, we'd all come together. And that's where we really found and got into the co-ops and all those things. And she was diagnosed with autism at age 8 and dyslexia and sensory processing and language and some different things. So I was just really like, okay, I made the right decision. Like I knew I did, but it still feels good to be validated. And it was hard because I was like, ADHD was on my radar, but not autism. And I was crushed. Like I was crushed for her. Because my mind immediately went to like, oh my gosh, she's not gonna reach all that I had for her. And I had to really just rein it in. And that's why earlier when I said meeting them where they are, like that, like unschooling it's not just about my kids and what they can learn and those things. It has changed our family dynamic and like the whole family. We really do learn together. It's changed me as a mother, and it's about relationships too, not just what can they learn, when can they learn it, here's this interest, let's move on to the next thing. And so I've got like my son, he's not diagnosed, but I'm pretty sure he's dyslexic too. I mean, I'm dyslexic, my mom's dyslexic, and I didn't feel the need to get him diagnosed because I'm at a different point. I'm not saying that you never should. I think if you want to know for certain, and there are certain resources I would say that are probably not available to us because I don't have a diagnosis for him, but I'm at a different point, like I said, where I'm not trying to force him. I wasn't trying to force him to learn how to read like I did with his sister, and that backfired big time. So she did learn. It was just later. She didn't start learning until about 10, but that's when most dyslexics are actually like able to start learning. So now she reads, she loves to read. She reads all the time, books over and over, and they love to read. So it was a journey. And I also had to learn how to de-school myself because I went to traditional school and I had all these thoughts about how things should go. And that's basically why it's called like unschooling, is that you don't have to do things the way you would at school. It's, what if school didn't exist? What if traditional schooling didn't exist? How would you live your life? It's a lifestyle for us. And that's how we arrived here.
So I think that two things that you mentioned really stuck out to me. The first thing is I love how everyone here was like, I never was trying to homeschool. I came from the same mindset. Like, yes, we're all like, yeah, put them babies in school. And then we're like, hold up, maybe that's not the answer. But the other thing was definitely about the homeschool co-ops and finding the communities. I think that that is a great tip for anyone who's, you know, thinking about starting a homeschool, thinking about what that might look like for you. I found that the community has been very helpful. So definitely, I love that you mentioned Virginia Beach had a really big community. Philadelphia is, we get in there, but there are some cities that have really good communities. So definitely seek that out as you're starting to go, because I think that that has been really helpful for us. But going back onto that, without the homeschool pod there now, Darcel, how has it changed for you? Like the way that you homeschool now without that kind of support? Is anything different? Or, I mean, what are you guys doing to kind of supplement or replace that with the absence of that community?
We've had some rough moments. Like back when everything first started, I was like, I got this. We've been doing this for so long. This is going to be easy. And everything shut down. And then it was just like, we're home. Mm-hmm. I mean, we went, you know, we hiked here and there, and then they started shutting down our parks, and we couldn't even do that. And it's one thing to be like, oh, you know, I don't want to go here today, but then to say I can't because I'm not allowed and they're closed is different. And so we got a bunch of board games for Christmas, and I basically just went back to the basics. What would I do if this was just completely brand new? And we made a list. When they were younger, we made a board jar. And so we went back to something like that, made a list, kind of like a board jar to pull things out. You're bored. Okay, well, here's a list of things to do. What do you want to do? And, you know, we did virtual things, but after a while you get burnt out on that too, because you miss connecting with people. And one reason we're not back with our homeschool group right now is my kids have asthma and my son has it the worst. So I'm extra cautious with him. And right now we've been, you know, we have our hikes. They do connect with their friends here and there, just not as regularly as we were. We watch a lot of movies together, documentaries. But I also, there's quiet time. Everybody needs quiet time during the day. Our rhythm it's been like this. And normally we would have like rhythms change anyway with the seasons. But I have found over the last few months, and I had to learn to just kind of relax and go with it, because that's what the kids needed. Because even if they didn't come out and say, this is stressing me out, or I feel overwhelmed with this situation too, it was coming out in their behavior. And so I was like, okay, we got to find some other things to do. And so I started implementing quiet time again. And it's like, you know, this is like some form of self-care for you too. You have 30 minutes in the middle of the day, no devices. You can read, paint, draw. You can just sit there and stare up at the ceiling if you want to, journal, like whatever it is that you need to do to center yourself again, and then move on with the rest of the day. And it's not that they can only do it at like 3 p.m. They can do it whenever they need. But we've just, like, as a family, really come together even more to figure out what is going to work for us during this time, because this is the first time we've been through anything like this. And then, like I said, just being willing and flexible to go with the flow as it needs to.
Right. So one thing I think is a lot of people who were coming from traditional school and then they're trying to homeschool now because of the pandemic. They're kind of like, they look at homeschoolers and they're like, "Oh, you guys been doing this, but we're like, good. We used to be out. We used to go to museums. Like we were not sitting at home all the time. So it's been difficult for us too. So Eva, I would love it if you could share a little bit about like how things have changed for you and what types of things that you do now. As well, now that our options are so limited.
Well, I was new to regular school. That was the big change for me. So I'm like, oh gosh, I am free. Y'all are out. Somebody else's issue. And they also wanted to go, right? I give them the option, even my oldest, give them the option at 9th grade. You want to go? Do you want to try it? You can always come home. I will always give you the option to come home, but if you want to try it, let's do it. So they did not want to come home, and I was not rushing to have them home, right? The cool thing is they already had that homeschool brain where they're very resourceful. If they want to learn something or need to learn something, they'll get it done. Even though it was only the two of them in the last few years that were at home, I used Google Classroom with them, even though it was just the two of us. So they knew how to get assignments. They knew how to turn in assignments. So when they went to public school, it was not a huge, huge change. Again, I was very traditional about mine. It was not full on school at home. I was still, hallelujah, we're done by 12 because we can get up early. By noon, you're out of my hair, and then we go do activities and stuff like that. I'm not pressuring you to learn things at 5 and 6 o'clock in the evening. So, we still were used to that flexibility. And when they came home, first when there was the Chicago school strike, and they had no access to teachers. So that was the first time I was like, whoa, so y'all are coming back. And they were panicked, like, please let school reopen. But yeah, it's very, very different. So the way that they had it here, they came home and kind of, they were floundering a little bit about like, how are they going to do this? And, homeschool parents are like, can we just get to, it's not that hard, but for a huge school system, it's very, very difficult to get everybody on that same page. Again, they don't have that homeschool brain that kind of, you figure it out, you learn what you need to learn and make it work. So when they came home, we didn't have access to switch back to homeschooling. We would, in the middle of the day, we would go play tennis. We would go, to a field and run around. You'd be able to set up something with the co-op. We weren't members of one, but we'd have friends that were in the co-op and they'd say, hey, we're going on this field trip. But if museums are closed, the zoo is closed, they've closed the tennis courts, they've closed the parks. You can't even go for a walk at one point because Chicago was a little mini epicenter. It's very, very difficult to crisis school, as they call it, even if you're used to being a homeschooler. Everybody's like, oh girl, you'll just jump back in to what? This is not a normal thing. So, I hope that first time people that, you understand that this is not homeschooling for anybody, and it's not comfortable for anybody. So, we're still going to take that virtual school option because I have all the books here. I brought them with me, tons and tons of books just in case, because once a homeschooler, always a homeschooler, we are always prepared. So I have the books, especially since in some school systems, they don't give the kids books to take home. And my kids are book learners. So I still brought my son's high school books for my two high schoolers now. So they still do learn on their own. If they can't get what they need from what the teachers have given them, they know, go to the bookshelf. There is a chemistry book. There is a biology book. There is what else do we have on there? We have lots of English resources, all sorts of things where they kind of have a quasi homeschool thing happening anyway, but they have the support and the activities, used to be activities of the public school system. So we're kind of doing a little bit of both right now.
Right. I love that. I love that you said that we're crisis schooling. This is not homeschooling for any of us. That's really important to say. Like, we're all in a crisis mode here. But that being said, I would love to hear from Amaka about basically how you get started doing this, right? So you, I think, did exactly what like a lot of parents are like where they're at. They're like, okay, the school isn't working, or that was difficult, or the distance learning is not really up our alley. How can we do our own path? And I think that your Black Girl Magic School is a perfect example of that. So can you share how you actually get started and begin to do something like that for your children?
Sure. So after I realized, and my daughter's 4, but we have lots of conversations. I parent from the perspective of being nurturing and a conscious parent first. And so we had a conversation just around, you know, her emotions, what she was feeling, how much she missed her friends, how much she missed her teacher. I, you know, had some, you know, just some reflections around what I needed and what she needed. And I, at the time, you know, thank God for technology, she had been having some virtual play dates with some of her schoolmates. And so they would have virtual play dates during the day because I'm working and their mom is working or their dad's working. And so they're doing virtual play dates. And, you know, as I sat down and decided, you know what, she needs social interaction. And she needs to have someone else other than me 24/7. She thrives off of that, and I couldn't give that learning to her. I reached out to a couple of parents in her classroom because I wanted to start with people that I trust, people that I have some commonalities with, people who I know were adhering, or that I hoped were adhering to the same social distancing and safety and health measures. And so for parents who are interested in trying to start a learning pod, I would start there, right? Start with your circle first. Start with their classmates, start with your friends who have children who are maybe the same age, or they necessarily don't have to be in the same age, be the same age or in the same class. So I reached out to a couple of parents and said, hey, you know, how have you been managing? I'm thinking of starting a quarantine pod. You know, we can be our own little squad. We could do some play dates with one another. Just make sure our kids have some safe social interaction with one another. And then I was like, well, you know what? I got space. You know, my daughter's playroom is already set up literally like a Montessori classroom. I don't mind showing it to everyone if they want to see it at some time during this call. My backyard is already set up like a personal park for my daughter. And so I said, you know what, if I can get their teacher to teach, I'll run a micro school here, or, you know, we'll have something here for them. So I reached out to their teacher and, you know, talked her through what I was thinking of. And she stepped up to the plate and said that she was more than willing, that she really missed her students. And I talked to the parents and we all agreed. And so we as parents have had continuous Zoom meetings to talk through different policies and procedures, what we need in place. You know, coming back to the drawing board and say, this is what's working, this is what's not working. You know, in the beginning, the girls weren't wearing masks, they weren't wearing face shields. At about week 5, we decided to start wearing masks. That lasted all of a couple of days, and we thought that was so just a huge health hazard for the girls, because all they do is this, down and up and out. Oh wow, this stretches, let me see if it smacks me on my face. Just all these different things. Hey baby, you want some popcorn? Okay. After mommy's done, why don't you just sit here with me for a little bit? Ure, say hello. You can use your words, mama.
Hi. Hi.
And so we then decided, what is a better, safer option, right, for our girls? And we went to face shields. And so our girls, you know, every time, what happens at 9 o'clock when it's time for school? What do you put on?
Face shield.
She puts on her face shield. And they wear their face shield the entire school day unless they are, when do you take your face shield off if you're doing what?
Outside.
Mm-hmm.
Taking a nap.
Mm-hmm.
Eating.
That's right. If they're outside playing, if they're taking a nap, or if they're eating. Otherwise, they have their face shield on. And so as parents, for example, we have a Zoom call this coming Friday just to kind of talk through the first day of school, to talk through what do we do when Thanksgiving comes up and Christmas comes up? How do we honor the fact that we have this little blessing of a situation? We have Black Girl Magic School at my home, but I probably will want to cook for Thanksgiving just for, me and my daughter, or we may be going out of town, or I may need that week to recharge. Our teacher, she has a family. She may want to cook for her family. How do we make sure that we are thinking through things that may come up? That's how we decided to lengthen our hours. And so, for the families out there that are considering doing something similar, I would say be transparent with one another. Have open dialogue, right? Ask powerful questions that allow for people to engage in fruitful dialogue around what's needed. As a host house, think through the things like, a cleaning list, right? So what needs to be cleaned every single day? We are incredibly blessed at Black Girl Magic School. Our teacher has a high school daughter who comes with her, and we pay her high school daughter to be like our mini cleaner, right? So while she's here, and she transitions their spaces. So if they're doing some one-on-one or independent practice at the table, but then at now they're going to outside, she cleans off their table. We just keep the place really sanitized. And so think through, but then every morning I wake up 30 minutes earlier than I want to wake up, and I clean all the light switches on the first floor. I clean the railing to go upstairs. It's okay, babe. I clean I sanitize the front doorknob. I sanitize the kitchen refrigerator handles, the kitchen sink, the sink in the powder room, because we have a procedure when the girls come in that they've learned. They come in, they take their shoes off, they step in the powder room, they wash their hands, they come out, they get hand sanitizer, they put their lunch that their parents make for them in the fridge on their dedicated Black Girl Magic shelf that I no longer can use in my fridge. It's for them. And then they go upstairs because they have their face shield on at the door. They go upstairs and they start school. And so think through those things. I didn't create a cleaning chart until I think week 4, when I was like, okay, we need to make sure we're cleaning the same spaces every single day. I don't want to miss a space, right? So we created a cleaning chart. So think through things like that. Think through if you're a host home, can you stomach the additional utilities costs? Kids need AC in Texas, and winter's gonna come and they're going to need heat. Those little hands, when they wash their hands, they turn on the water and it runs for like 3 minutes before they actually wash their hands. Yep. You times that by 5 little girls, that's a lot of water. Think through the cleaning supplies that you have to constantly have and replenish. How are you all making that happen as a pod of parents? How are we making sure when we go to the store, if I see disinfectant wipes, which we keep in the bathroom, so after every use of their dedicated bathroom, their Black Girl Magic bathroom upstairs, that we're wiping that space down. The cans of Lysol spray, which are a super hot commodity right now, how are we making sure that as a parent, if you see those, you snag them? Paper towels, toilet paper. So think through those things. I would say the most important thing is, transparency, parents who are of a similar mindset and adhering to the same safety and health practices. And then having ongoing conversations and being open to feedback, and leading with empathy when it comes to whoever is teaching your pod. And so, as a host family or as a host home, think through, sometimes parents may need to drop their kid off at 8:30 because they have a call at 9 that they have to be on, or traffic happens, right? Life happens. They may pick them up a little late. So thinking through some of those things has really helped our Black Girl Magic School to really thrive. I mean, we are, like I said, we're incredibly blessed.
Mommy, really, really collaborative type of community, which I think is definitely important when you're trying to do a learning pod and things like that. So I agree, you guys are very blessed. It sounds like an amazing school. So for people who, you might be wanting to set up a learning pod. So Amaka has shared a lot about that. But then, moving into the more, I guess, nitty gritty of homeschooling, like what it actually looks like. Eva, you shared a little bit about how you went from doing K to 12 and then you moved into buying the books from school. I would love for you to just share a little bit about how it really looks when you're choosing those curriculums, you're setting up the schedules, especially for children who are at different ages or different grade levels. And then if you could also just touch a little bit about, touch on, parents' concern about going back to school and are they on grade level and how that whole part works into the idea of it.
Well, as far as scheduling goes, I would say think about it as you have this like a bowl, right? And you only have so much room to put things in this bowl, and you're going to fill it up with rocks, right? So you look for the big rocks. I think it's John Maxwell that talks about the big rocks. I think that's him. But you put the big rocks in first, and then you kind of fit the little rocks around it and until it's full. So what do you know you're going to do every day? You're going to do breakfast every day. You're going to do lunch every day. You're going to do dinner. So you go ahead and put those on the calendar. You may have a younger child who takes a nap. By now, you know when that nap time is. If they were in school before, it's probably going to be around the same time. It might be a little off because of this weird spring, summer, whatever this was. It might be a little off, but you choose when that nap time is for your youngest. You might choose a reading time for your elementary school child, and then maybe just take a break, go outside, get some air for your older child, right? So you put those big things in. Those are things that you absolutely know need to happen. And then you think about your curriculum. If you know during the week, I never did the exact same thing on back-to-back days, because that can get very, very tedious. And in schools, a lot of times they don't do that either. So I would have a Monday, Wednesday schedule, and then a Tuesday, Thursday schedule. And I did not do things on Fridays, because homeschool can be very, very intense. They're listening to the same person all the time, unless you have tutors. We had tutors sometimes, but they're always with you. You are mom, you are teacher, you are college counselor, you are, you're telling them when to go to bed. It's a lot for them. So I tried to make sure that they had a 3-day weekend. They would do school related things on Friday if they had certain activities or co-op or something like that, where they would go on a field trip. But the hardcore days of learning would be Monday through Thursday. So after that, I would put in the main things, and we'll talk about testing in a second, but that math and English are going to be tested. So I would put those two things in. Those are big rocks. So I put those in. So your day is going to start to shape up a little bit. And then, after that, you might put in science and social studies. And because those aren't usually full hour classes. Well, none of mine were a full hour, but that might be 20 minutes. And then you add the kind of fun stuff like music and art. And you think about what your child is like. That's the really, really neat thing about having them at home, is that you can think about what kind of person they are. If they are a person who is creative first thing in the morning, you wake up and they're already playing with Legos, they're already playing with blocks. Okay, cool. So the night before, you need to set up whatever your art project is going to be, get their creative brain going first thing in the morning. If there's somebody who they need to wind down at the end of the day doing a creative project, then you may set that up for the end of the day. If you want to kind of reduce screen time, you can, schedule your day around that. But the great thing is You get to put in your big deal things first, and that's not how traditional school works. If you are focused on math, science, English, you're really concerned about that testing and keeping them, keeping up with what the traditional school system says they should be doing, then you get to decide what your big deal things are. As far as testing goes, if you are in a public school, in a school district where they allow you to go take the test as a homeschooler, you can just register for that at your neighborhood school. When we were in DC, they would have testing dates. They would be made public, and you just register in enough time that they could order the test. You go to the school site, take the test, and that's that. Now it's probably going to be a little different because testing, we didn't even have testing here for the public school kids. We didn't have testing the same way at the end of the year so that they can go on to, choose their selective enrollment schools and things like that. So testing is going to look different. They do have some online tests for reading, like dibbles and those sorts of tests that can be administered online. If you want to be sure and you're concerned. I wasn't that concerned until we got to SAT, and I just used the SAT book as their vocabulary book. So that way, the vocabulary section I didn't have to worry about. We got spelling and vocabulary straight out of the SAT book and called it a day. So I wasn't, hyper focused on that thing as far as, because I felt like, and your kid, how they're progressing, and you can kind of think back to when you were a kid. Did I know this stuff by now? So you can kind of wing it. Kids are resilient. You're not going to break them. Okay, I know when they're infants, you're like, oh my gosh, until you drop them the first time and they're perfectly fine, might have a little bruise, but they're perfectly fine. You're not going to break them. And if you're only doing it for this school year, please believe, unless they have other issues, they have an IEP, something like that, they're going to be fine. But if testing is the thing that you're concerned about, there's a website called testingmom.com, and you can go on there and see what tests are required for your area, and then have them try out those tests and see where they land in comparison to everybody else. But as far as what you need for homeschooling, as far as testing goes, you just need to check with your local area. Once they got to high school, I made sure they were prepared for the ACT and prepared for the SAT. And that wasn't too hard. Got the books, and that was that. And now you don't even have to get the books. You can go on Khan Academy. They are now linked up with College Board, I believe. And is it College Board or is it Princeton Review? One of those two that used to make the books. I don't know which one it is, but they have the whole thing for free online. No more $50 books. You don't have to do any of that. Whole thing is online for free, starting with PSAT 8-9. So everything is there. You do not have to panic. They will be fine. And if you must know, it's Khan Academy and testingmom.com. You can find out where they land.
Okay, thank you. Those are actually some good resources. I know for like our state, we do have the standardized testing, but it's only in like 3 grades. It's like 3rd, 5th, and 7th. And like beyond that, you're not required to do any standardized testing. And we apparently live in like one of the strictest states. So I agree, don't panic, and just find out what's required of you. And you might be surprised. It's not that much.
Not a lot. It's like, if you want to take the test, you can. Otherwise, wait for college if they want to go. Because don't go through all that and your kid's like, yeah, I'd rather be a plumber. And you're like, did I really spend that much on SAT prep when you could have just gone and did what you want to do?
I love it. So really quick, Eva, before we move on, can you just talk a little bit about how much time you take planning and preparing for that? Because I know that that's a big thing, the time constraint. Like how am I supposed to do this? I work full time. I'm trying to be home. How much time are you really sitting down to plan and do all of that mapping out for each of your children?
Well, so I went to law school full-time and homeschooled and worked, which I don't recommend for anybody. A lot of us don't have a choice now, so you got to do it. But I would not, if you could not do it, don't do it. Okay. I had help. There is no way that a human being can do that much alone. I had help. So my husband would, he was working full time, but he was around, his office was around the corner from the school. And the kids were, I wouldn't even say homeschooled, they were car schooled, because we would just keep trading. And he'd be like, oh, I'm gonna go get coffee, and then go pick up the kids. And we just keep trading while I was in class. And then after that, if I had something that, you know, we couldn't work that out, I had my cousin who was also nearby, and she would help me out as well. So the planning was basically syncing Google Calendars and making sure that he knew what I had going on, my cousin knew what I had going on, I knew what they were doing, so that we could kind of put all of this together. So it wouldn't always be me teaching this class. So the planning went in on the weekends, where I'd say, all right, these are the things that I want them to get through this week. And they're very, for the most part, they're pretty self-directed. You got to jump in on some of it. If they think you're leaving them alone too much, to be like, she ain't ever gonna check. And that's why I like Google Classroom, because yes, I am gonna check. I'm gonna get an email if you didn't do it. But for scheduling, it was probably about maybe 3 hours of planning on the weekend. It sounds like a lot, but it's not, because you would have to kind of go through your schedule, see what field trips you were going to do, so that you don't have to fuss with history that week. I mean, let's just be real. Sometimes you just don't want to. And you can say, all right, if I plan for them to have 3 hours of history this week, part of that's going to be done at the museum, part of that's going to be done at the co-op if we're going to do African history or something like that. And the rest of it will be, you know, maybe some constitutional stuff. I was in law school, so I'd have them read my cases or read things like that so that we could discuss them. So yeah, it was about 3 hours, because you might have to prep an art project, prep a science project, make sure that you knew what they did last week, how they did last week, so that you can kind of alter what you're doing this week, maybe move a little faster or move a little slower. So that's what it was as far as planning, kind of prepping for the week.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. You had a full plate. When I was reading your bio, I was like, going law school, homeschooling, writing 2 books, and I'm like,
yeah, don't do that. I'm just gonna tell you, please, if you're listening, don't do it. Don't do it. Pick a thing. Pick 2 things. Don't do all the things, because after that, I had to take like 2 years off to get my mind back to working order. So don't do it.
Take that advice. But one thing I definitely want to talk to Nwamaka and Darcel about is, I know that Eva said she had help, and I also, you know, I homeschool my 3 children, and I also have a lot of help from my husband. He is also an entrepreneur, so we're both in the home a lot. And there's kind of this myth around homeschooling that, like, oh, it's only for married mothers who don't work and they just have the time to do it. And I know that that's not the case, like not for anyone on this panel. So I would love to hear about kind of how you manage that, being a single mother, and doing homeschool, and, you know, just managing it without, you know, by also working, because I know Eva and Darcel, you both also work. So and Nwamaka, you all work. So how are you managing that without the kind of help with, like, as in a traditional partner or something like that?
Well, my parents recently moved here last July, so I do have some help now. Of course, you know, with the pandemic, we're not spending as much time with them. I heavily relied on the homeschool co-ops. And even then, I would, like the one in Virginia, I ended up getting separated in 2013, and we were still living in Virginia at the time. So to be a part of that particular homeschool co-op, you also had to be a teacher and help clean and all those things. So the day was set up, and it was every Friday. So the day would be set up where I would have a break in between my classes, and that was like kind of my time. Sometimes I wanted to sit and chat with the other moms, and sometimes I wanted to go to the car because I just needed to. And then, like, since we've been here and everything going on and still not having access to all the things we used to, and my kids are older now, so it's much, much easier when they're older because they can, you know, kind of do for themselves for the most part. But I will say, you got to make some time for yourself. I know people think like, oh, mom, I don't have, you know, I don't have time for that. You make the time, because if you don't, you're gonna suffer, your kids are gonna suffer, and it's just it's a nasty downward spiral from there. 5-10 minutes a day, if you got to wake up 20 minutes earlier, whatever it takes, and not just like outside things that we feel good, you know, make us feel good or look good, but like the deep down soul stuff that we like. I mean, for some people it could be just like, I just want to read 2 chapters of a book, that makes me feel great, that re-energizes me. Gardening, FaceTime a friend, go for a walk. Like, I don't know, there's so many different things people do, photography, knitting. I mean, the possibilities are endless, but finding that time for yourself, and I guess making the time for yourself really is important. And my kids, like I said, since they're older, I really can include them. I always have, but they just, you know, they have more to say now, I guess, that they're older. And like, we've already thought about what winter is going to look like, because we're not going to be able, we probably won't do the trails as much because we don't want to be cold. So things like baking, and I'm not the type of person or parent where it's like, okay, we're going to bake on this day at this time, because we don't know what's going to happen. Maybe we don't feel like baking on that day. Maybe we decide we want to bake on Wednesday or Friday, or maybe we decide we want to bake every day that week. But just coming up with some sort of plan, but being willing to be flexible. I know I keep saying that, but because it's important, because you're probably going to go into this and be like, I'm going to be like, Sheila, I got this. And then something's going to happen and you feel like, oh man, well now I'm off track. Now what? It's okay. Like, that's life. Just be willing to be flexible and roll with it a little bit more. The library is a great resource for us. They have curbside pickup. We can also go in. I let my kids pick out whatever books they want. I don't have a rule on really what they can and can't read. And I also, like, I pick out some books for them though. That's the thing. They can pick it however many they want, and then I add the ones I want them to read. And then having, you know, like I mentioned quiet time before, but also just like my son Samuel, he's one of those kids, he wants to get up in the morning, he's ready to go. He wants to talk about, like I said, the solar system. He's one of those kids, he wants to get up and build empires out of his Legos. And I'm not a morning person. So I have to get up. Part of my self-care is getting up in the morning and making that time for myself, so that when he gets up, I'm ready to meet him. Because otherwise I'm just like, I don't know. I don't want to talk about the planets right now. Like, I'm just not mentally prepared to deal with this. So I get up before them to have my time. So then when they get up, I've got one, my 13-year-old, she needs to chill in the morning. She just needs to sit for an hour or so and not really do anything. My 15-year-old, she's also like, she stays in her room for a good hour before she even comes out to be around anybody. And I allow them that, because they're, you know, we sometimes forget that kids, they know themselves.
Right.
They need to learn how to listen to their body and what they need and how long they need it. And so I've just been really trying to be that and let them do what they need for however long they may need it, and then we can come together. And our every day really looks different for us. Like I said, I mean, we do watch movies and different things together. They've got notebooks. It could be, we've used Thinkster math, CTC math, Time for Learning. When they were younger, we used Starfall. I know parents are sometimes like, man, I don't want them sitting in front of the screen all the time. And I get that. But sometimes, like, my kids are visual and hands-on learners. So while they like the books for a little bit of instruction, they're ready to immediately go to the hands-on stuff and how can I figure this out and put this together and take it apart. So they watch a lot of YouTube videos. I search Pinterest for them, and like, you know, they're older now, so they can hop on Google and search for some things themselves. But I guess I would say the main thing is making sure I have my time so I can pour into them, and then giving myself some grace throughout the day, because every day is not going to be the best. Some days it's rough. I mean, there's me and my two daughters. We got hormones flying off all over the place. Cabin fever sets in. You know, it's just some days aren't going to be that great. But again, being flexible and just being willing to roll with the punches. I'm gonna say it again, give yourself some grace. It is very important.
I need to take that note for myself because I struggle with that. I'm always beating myself up about what I didn't get done and something else on the list, and I want to do this, that for this child. So yeah, I'm taking that as a personal note for myself. But other thing, Darcel, because I know that aside from how to manage it if you're a single parent or you're in a one parent household, another thing that people kind of struggle with is, especially if they have a child with special needs, and how does that work. And you know, I know that in our district, there is, if your child has an IEP, there's kind of a different path you have to take. There are different requirements. So I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit about how that is with your child with special needs, and if there is anything different that you're required to do or anything like that, so people who have children like that, they can you know, figure out if they still can do homeschooling. Obviously they can, because you do. So
so I know, like, here in Ohio and in our district, if I wanted to, I could enroll her into a school in Columbus that is specifically for autistic children and children with ADHD. I don't know what they're doing now, but they were sending tutors to the homes. So I'm assuming now they would be virtual. You had to fill out the paperwork, take them in, get the IEP and all that set up. I looked into it and decided I didn't want to do that. And she wasn't too keen on the idea either. So we decided not to go that route. I will say one of the harder parts is not so much like academically speaking, because I'll just be honest and say, even though she is 15, she is not academically where other 15-year-olds are. And that's something, when you have a child with special needs as a parent, you have to learn to be okay with that. Like I said earlier, to meet them where they are, you literally need to be able to meet them where they are. And there were days where she was in occupational therapy, because something as simple as, you know, we're in the middle of our day and she decides she's hungry, but she can't open the jar that she wants to open, or she can't, I say, hey, go into the refrigerator and the lunch meat is on the second shelf. What? Like it didn't register. And so we had to work on a lot of life skill things and following instructions and things being repetitive and helping her with things that I thought, like, man, I don't want to be doing this right now. Like, you're getting to the age where you should be able to do X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. But again, she wasn't, and that's not her fault. She couldn't help it. So I had to learn to meet her where she was and be like, you know what, this is your job. It's your job to help her and all your kids in whatever it is they need until they're able to do it on their own. I mean, even as adults, there are some things that we still need help with, you know? So things like that were hard. There are some parents whose children may not even be verbal. And it's like, how do because maybe they don't have access to all the therapies that they had at one time. So they're trying to pull all these different resources that they can to help their kids. And even, I cannot speak to that because I don't have a child. She is verbal, but I do know there are resources online for parents. I can go in and look some stuff up. I have a friend whose son is autistic and he was going to a special school and now he's at home. Thankfully, the teacher is able to come to the home. So really it's just a matter of figuring out what's going to work best for you and your kid, and knowing that may not be a hard rule for the rest of the school year. It might change 1 month, a week in. It might be where every day you are just like, oh my gosh, are we at this again?
Right.
And things just keep on changing because they have special needs. Having a child with dyslexia and being frustrated that they are not reading, because I was always taught this is the age you learn how to read, this is how everybody reads, and how come you're not getting it? Well, because their brain works differently, and that's okay. Again, reconciling that within myself to help them as best I can and say, okay, well, I have one who learned how to read by playing Animal Jam. It was a game she wanted to play. I sat with her for a while, and then she's like, I want to be able to do this on my own. So she learned how to read. Then the other one learned by graphic novels. And then my son, he also learned by playing games and different graphic novels. So just being willing to be flexible. Again, I keep saying that, but because it's important, and learning how to meet them where they are and not get upset when things don't go according to plan. And then you can call your school district too and just ask them like, hey, do you guys know of any resources? This is what's going on. Can you point me in that direction? Your friends, Facebook groups, Pinterest too is a great resource. Google it, whatever it is you have to do to be able to find those resources and then make it adaptable for your family.
Thank you for that. It seems like a common theme with everyone is just about knowing your child. And I think that that is a great thing to just keep in mind. For parents who are like just starting off, you have this chance to really be there with your child one-on-one now. And like, you have a really big opportunity to learn who they are, what they're like. And I think that that really goes a long way in your homeschool journey, regardless of how you decide to do it. So there's just one other question I wanted to ask before we go into the questions from the audience, and that is just related to the cost of this. So I know that has been like a big question within circles, especially when it comes to things like the learning pods. And, you know, Unamaka, you had to hire a teacher. You know, you mentioned some of the costs associated with keeping up being the host home. And I know, Eva, you mentioned a lot of resources that are free. But if each of you could just touch on briefly, you know, how much being a homeschooling family, whether you're doing learning pods, unschooling, what kind of costs are associated with that? And yeah, so if we can start with you, Amaka, because you are the one who hired the teacher, and I'm sure that that was a pretty, you know, significant cost. So I think you're muted, Amaka. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yep, you're back.
Okay. So our kids all attended a school that was a private Christian school. So we were paying tuition. So we essentially are still paying tuition. And so our pod day is from, our school starts at 9 and it ends at 3. And we're paying $250 for our pod per week. So each parent pays $250 in tuition per week. And then we also, you know, have a cleaner here as well. And that's an additional, we give her an additional stipend of $200 a week, the cleaner, as a combination, the $200. And then we all chip in for cleaning supplies. So like I said, we've been blessed where we're Costco and Sam's Club shoppers. And so, you know, you get that big that big container of paper towels or toilet paper. You stand in line at 9 o'clock when you get that text message from your, you know, favorite Costco employee letting you know they have Lysol spray, they have wipes, and you go and you get your maximum limit of one, and hope that another parent was able to get up and get her maximum limit of one too. But I would say that pods are ranging, I have a couple of other friends who started pods, and I think some of their pods are more expensive, some are less expensive. So I would say pods right now are ranging, depending on the number of kids, where every parent is contributing anywhere between $100 a week as like a tuition or stipend or gift of gratitude towards the teacher, to upwards of about $300 a week, which essentially, if you look at it from a monthly cost, it's the cost of daycare or the cost of tuition at a ECE, early childhood education center. So you're looking at anywhere between $500 to $1,200 a month. So very similar to daycare costs, I would say. And then same thing through Nannyland. If we were to supply a nanny educator, the pod cost also looks very similar, ranging from families paying $200 a week to $300 a week for a nanny educator. And so, yeah, it's not, I would say that despite what we pay, what I see my daughter getting, and my daughter went to a great school, it's priceless. We're incredibly blessed, but also something that I grapple with is the astronomical divide that is going to further create in the education system. It is truly going to, it's almost like you see the literal, just delineation between creating the haves and those that just cannot, because they don't have the economic resources. And that was something, when I think about equity in the work that I do and the work that I've done and all the roles that I've had as a professional. So even with Nannyland families, I have had some families who have come to me who can afford to pay for my service, and they're not looking necessarily for a pod, but they're looking to employ me to provide them a referral for a nanny educator for just their 2 kids. Maybe they don't want a pod, they just want someone to come in their home for their 2 kids. And the referral fee they pay me is a flat fee of $250. And what I've done for some of the families is say, you know what? Don't pay me the referral fee. Instead, go ahead and pay that towards my sponsorship with Nannyland that we offer. So therefore we can offset the cost for families who can't afford $200 or $300 a week. So then when they do reach out to Nannyland and say, hey, I do really need this, we do really need this for a pod, I can then say, hey, we've had some families who have decided to pay it forward or to help out another family have access to what every kid deserves, despite what their families can afford to pay, and provide that service to them at a more feasible financial cost. And so that's what we pay. That's what we're doing.
Thank you. And Eva, you had a lot of free resources and things like that that you let us know about. Can you share a little bit about, curriculum, things like that, like those kind of costs for people who might be, they're not necessarily ready to do like a learning pod, but they still want to do homeschooling on their own?
Well, it really depends. A lot of people, they say, can I homeschool for free? You can, but that's a lot of free trials. That's a lot of hunting and searching. And then you just have to decide, how much is my time worth? How much time do I plan to spend searching down these free resources? So I, again, was more of a traditional, I was educated traditionally in a prep school. And so I went online and looked for the homeschool versions of my usual textbook, the Harcourt textbooks, like the traditional textbooks that you find in a school system. Because at the time, my children were, my oldest was a college-bound child. So there's a type of book that you're going to go through if they're going to go to a school that may or may not be homeschool friendly. So there are some schools that are homeschool friendly and they don't require the same types of transcripts. They don't require you to kind of conform to what a high school would have provided. So, you know, it just really depends on what your kid is trying to do and where they're trying to go. If they're trying to go to a community college or something like that, you may be able to do a more limited curriculum. There's some that are more religious, right? So, and those have their own fees associated with them. But a school textbook, if you were to just buy the school textbook, remember, you got to buy that answer key too and figure out where you're going to hide it, because kids are kids and they will come looking for the answers. They don't want just the odd answers, they want the even answers too. But anyway, you're going to have to buy the teacher's edition and the student edition. And those are pretty thick hardcover books. And so each one of those was about $125 for the set. And it also depends on how many different things you're doing. So if you're doing Saxon math, you may, if you started in Saxon math, or if the school they were in, if you want to make that transition kind of easy, if they're moving from a school setting to a homeschool setting, you may for that first year want to find out what was the next book that they were going to use. So those books are usually somewhere, and the answer key, and some of them have worksheets. Some of the science books have online opportunities where they can do science experiments online. They can kind of walk through different things that's in the textbook. So it just really depends on what path you're going to take. You have some kids, and you talk to them as often as you can. What do you want to do next, so that you can prepare them for that thing? Understand they might decide junior year they want to be physicians. And then you got to figure something out, and it can get expensive to get the more traditional books that move them along that kind of that track. But yeah, it can, the books per subject, if you're going to go the traditional route, it can be about $75 to $125 per subject. If you're getting the teacher's guide, the student workbooks, and the textbook. They have all-in-one curriculum systems that are a little less expensive because you get everything at once. But what you have to remember about that, if you are trying to do an individualized thing, if you find that your kid is really, really focused on math and they're moving faster in the math, you may end up having to purchase things more than once. They move through the math curriculum, they're not quite finished with the English, and then what do? Your kid is interested in math, you got to buy something else. So it can get pretty pricey, but if you, and also, let me tell you this, there are free online textbooks on Amazon that you can download. I know a lot of people don't, but read them first. Let me just be, because I did that. When I tell you I've done everything, I've done everything. I've had my cheap moments, and they have full textbooks online for free, but read them. Okay. There will be typos and questionable things, so you just got to read them. You get what you pay for.
Gotcha. Okay, that's a really good tip. I didn't know there were free textbooks on Amazon, but yes, I can only imagine some of the things you might find in there if you're not careful.
You're like, is this Wikipedia? What am I looking at? You just got to be, some of them are great, some of them not so much.
Okay. Good to know. All right, so we're just going to see if we can get into some of these questions from the audience before we wrap up. I think I would love to start with someone asked, how can I keep my 4-year-old engaged in topics while at home? Any ideas for play-based learning? Amaka, do you want to take this? This one, you got the little girl, little mama on your lap. I'm sure you have a lot of good insight.
Yes, and I'm sure she'll speak up and tell you guys if it's not fun. So yeah, how to keep your 4-year-old engaged. So how I keep my 4-year-old, as well as the other 2 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds that we have in Black Girl Magic School. We do a lot of activities. So we use Pinterest a lot, and we have, can you go get your engineering book from me upstairs? Go get your engineering book and your science book. Here, you can take my, to use it as a flashlight. See, there's a light. You got it.
I don't want to see.
It's too dark. Okay, Mom, I'll do it later. So we have this really cool engineering book and this really cool science book, but we, in terms of a free resource, because I'm super frugal. So in terms of free resources, get on Pinterest. Pinterest is your best friend. You can feel free to go to Nannyland's Pinterest page. We create different boards with different activities. So if you go to Nannyland and go, whether you go to our website or whether you go to Instagram, you'll be able to get plugged right into our Pinterest page. That will allow you to find different activities. So arts and crafts activities. And like I said, I'm not the teacher for Black Girl Magic School. I'm kind of like a classroom mom, right? I still get to like volunteer in the classroom, which happens to be my house. And so I lead 2 specials with them a week. So for example, the 2 specials we're doing this week, we're doing salt art creation, where essentially you take glue, Elmer's glue, you let them squeeze it into whatever design or drawing they want to draw on a paper and then you coat that glue that they drew with salt, and then you go ahead and bring out some paint, some watercolor paint with a toothbrush, and you let them go ahead and paint it. It turns out beautiful. I always have to try the lesson first because I've had some bloopers where I forgot some steps and the girls have been like, how could you? And so another activity we're doing this week is one that I've seen some Pinterest pages about it, doing like almost like an obstacle course, right? Outside with chalk. So you draw a squiggly line and have to go over the squiggly line in 3 circles and have to jump in 3 circles. Well, we are doing an academic obstacle course on Friday to culminate the summer. So we're going to draw it from my sidewalk to 2 of my neighbors' sidewalk up. And it's going to be stuff that they've been learning all summer. So like some of your sight words, right? What are some of your sight words you've learned this summer? B, and what else?
B.
What other? Tell them some other words. You don't have to spell them all. Maybe just tell them some. What sight words have you learned?
Tell you what I learned.
What other words? With, right? And she is on. I.
S. N.
And is. And so we're going to put some of the sight words down, or we'll put, like, I'll draw it and it'll say, hold on to I'll draw it and it'll say, name 3 sight words and spell them, right? It'll have some basic addition that they've been doing. It will have some of the shapes, and they'll have to jump to the shape that we say. If we say square or rhombus, and they'll jump to it and we'll say, how many sides does it have? And so doing things like that, right? Because the goal is at 4 to get that energy out, right?
Yeah.
And some of the other things, YouTube is a great resource as well. Khan Academy is an amazing resource to use on if they have a digital device, whether it be a computer or an iPad. But I would say for sure, Pinterest is the best. We have done some of our specials. We've made pizzas in the air fryers, which literally takes like all of 7 minutes. It's so great. We've made French toast in the air fryer. We made ice cream in a bag. We had to make it twice because this classroom mom forgot we needed to add the salt while we were shaking it up. So they were just shaking and shaking like, Miss Amaka, my hands are getting so cold. Is it ice cream yet? And it never turned to ice cream because I forgot the salt. So we had to do it again the next day. But it was a great lesson in granting me grace and being empathetic towards me, and remembering that we all make mistakes. We learned about chromatography, and what else? Capillary action. So we did a science project right off of Pinterest where I think you need food coloring, paper towels, and 2 glass jars and some water, right? And so just go to Pinterest and think through, if you're saying, hey, you know what I want us to do an art activity, literally type in art activities with supplies in your home for a 4-year-old. You want to do a science activity. You want to do an activity that they can do with food and eat. So Pinterest is amazing, and I would say that's my best resource thus far.
Okay, perfect. There is another resource for anyone who might want like to keep children engaged with classes, because I know I have a younger son who sometimes needs just like to sit down and have someone else engaged. OutSchool is a really good resource that has like a bunch of different classes. They have like art classes. My son is doing like a basketball class on there with like a college basketball coach. So he gets an hour and a half where he's just letting off some steam and energy. So definitely check out OutSchool as well. If you just need something for them to do and let their energy out, they have good teachers on there. So this next question is for you, Eva. I think that you might have some insight. Someone asks, is there a hybrid approach of homeschooling and traditional virtual schooling to ensure success for all involved?
Well, that really would be up to you, how you wanted to do that. So I knew that my kids were going to have the opportunity to go to a traditional brick and mortar school when I was finished with them. So I did a lot of virtual things because that's what they're doing now. They're learning to use Blackboard and they're using Google Classroom to get their assignments. So, I would put videos in there. Sometimes I would do, National Geographic has different things like there's TED Talks. They have all sorts of things that I would put in to their Google Classroom so they can kind of get that virtual school feel, but then also have offline activities for them to do so they wouldn't be in front of a screen all day. K-12 is a really good option. It's offered for free in some states as a charter school option. And I haven't seen anywhere there's any admission standards to getting in. You just have, some of them have lottery, but where I was in DC at the time, you just registered like you registered for any other school. And it was mostly online, and they had books, and they had a kind of a teacher. You were more of the learning coach. They had a teacher, and again, this is free. They will send you the rocks for your experiments. They send a printer, a computer. They send, what else? So all the books, if there's an experiment that has feathers in it, they send you feathers. If there's something that, like we had a balance microscope, basically they send you an entire classroom for you to set up at your house. And depending on the school system, they actually pay for your internet. Okay. So when old girl told me to try K-12, she was like, oh, you need school in a box. So that is where I started. There is no shame in that, but it is kind of a virtual and virtual, offline, and then kind of an in-person, because there was a once a week face-to-face that was optional for some people, because some people made that choice because they had children with special needs that were difficult to transport. They may have children with health issues that they don't need to be in large group settings like that. But that's where we did testing, where the kids even had school pictures, and it didn't cost anything. So you can kind of do that hybrid thing if you want to, and do it for free depending on your school system, or you can create a hybrid model for yourself. I saw somebody in the chat mentioned OutSchool. It's a really, really cool way to add fun things to do as part of the virtual thing. If you are trying to do something hybrid, Khan Academy, we use that a lot. Please watch the history videos before you show them to your children. Math is fine, English is fine, SAT prep is fine, but that history is sketchy. So just wanted to put that out there. You gotta be careful with that.
Even like, listen, read it yourself, watch it yourself.
Listen, if they're at home, don't let nobody just put anything through the screen with your kids because you need a minute.
Right.
Watch the history video yourself. Okay. But yeah, there's ways to kind of create a hybrid thing for yourself. And they have some that are kind of commercially available. They have curriculums that you can buy that's outside of K-12 that have that kind of hybrid model.
Okay. Thank you. That is Perfect. So the last question that we'll take from the audience before we wrap up, I think this might be good for you to help us with, Darcel. And I'm going to combine two of them actually. So one person asks, what are some ways to schedule breakup work periods? And how long should work periods be according to age? And then also suggestions on how to create separation between home and school when we're quarantined.
So are they asking for work periods for the kids or for themselves?
I think, I'm not sure the way the questions were, but you know what? How about you just touch on, I guess, both? Because I feel like parents are coming from a point where they're working and they're schooling. So, like, how do you do that? Yeah, they said both.
Look, let me be honest, I'm still figuring it out, okay? It can vary day to day, week to week, but having a good rhythm in place to help with the transition is key. Some people prefer more of a strict routine, and that's totally fine. Hold on a second. Yes. Thanks for letting me know.
Someone else's kid.
Why? I was on Fortnite longer than I should have been.
Oh, that's so responsible.
Nice.
My son would never.
Nice.
Because he doesn't want to have his remote. Accountability.
Yes.
No, but I think for work, I will usually I have my assignments beforehand, so I know what day it's due and things like that. I mean, that's the way most people who are working from home, I would think, do. So you can say, okay, this is due on the 21st, no later than 4 p.m. So then throughout the week, you can say, if you need that time to get up earlier, maybe in the middle of your me time, you do 30, 45 minutes of work. My kids are older again, so I can say, hey, I have this to do at this time, so I need you guys to do, craft or read a book or whatever it is you need to do. And I mean, I wish I could say sometimes that our home and school is separate, but it's not. My house is very lived in, and I think if I had cameras or people came through, they would be like,
You got these kids
like this in the pictures on Instagram. So if they're working on a project, it's left out because it's unfinished. Mm-hmm. I know some people do need and want that dedicated space, and maybe you don't have a lot of room. So when I really, really need to hunker down, I can either come into my room, and sometimes I don't want to be in my room. Sometimes I want to be out in the living room or the kitchen. But if you need a dedicated space, like right now, I'm sitting in my room and I have one of the side end tables from the living room, and my Chromebook is on a shoebox. So
getting the job done.
Big things and set it up however you need. If I want to be out there, I can say, hey, can you need to go to your room? I need this hour to do this or that, or schedule it, put it on the calendar for them. And I also want to say, if you think because you don't have a school room that you're not going to do as well, it's not necessary. Mm-hmm. Maybe you don't have the budget for it right now. Maybe it's something you are building up to. Again, it's the little dedicated spaces. So I can have the library books, I have learned, have to stay out in the living room at all times because I had $50 in fines once. So let me say about that. I do purposefully put some things out for them, like strew things if I want them, outside of the things I tell them they have to read. Just kind of be like, oh, did you notice that over there? And sometimes I don't have to say anything, they notice it. Mm-hmm. But you can take your house or apartment and make small areas that are just for you or for the kids. This may be a time where, think of it as a home project and you are renovating on a budget if you need to. And the bedroom now has a little desk in it. The kitchen at this time of day is for schoolwork. After 4 or 5 or 12, 3, whatever time you cut off, it's back to being the regular, family kitchen. Just get creative, think outside the box. And I know we've mentioned Pinterest quite a bit, and it is a great resource. You can go on there and figure out how to set some things up. But don't feel like if it doesn't turn out that way, you failed and it's not going to work. Just, again, figure out through trial and error what's going to work for your family. If something's working, great, keep it, add to it. If it's not, just go back to the drawing board and try something else.
Right. Well, thank you guys for all your insight. We're going to wrap it up now. It's 9:55. So I would love to just, for each of you to let people know where they can find you, where they can find out about what you guys have going on. We'll start with you, Amaka, and just take it down, Darcel, then finish up with Eva.
Sorry, I was whispering kind eyes, we like to sample different faces. So thank you for this platform. First of all, I've learned so much that will help me as we continue to have our learning pod. Black Girl Magic School in our house. You can find me on Instagram at _just Amaka. So JU_JUSTAMAKA _just Amaka, because I am just Amaka. And you can find my business on Instagram at Nannyland. NANNYLANDS.
Great, thank you. And we're putting all of the links and the Instagram names in the chat, so you guys can go look there if you want to get the actual spelling and the links to the website. So Darcel, where can we find you at?
So yeah, some for chips now. I am themahoganyway.com. I can't even talk now. It's in the comment box, but THEMAHOGANY.com. I am the Mahogany Way on Pinterest. I am on Twitter, but don't really use it that much, but I'm Mahogany Way Mama on there. You want to scroll through my old tweets or whatever for any reason. And then I have a Facebook page that is the Mahogany Way. And then on Instagram, I'm the Mahogany Way. So you can find me there, and I have really enjoyed this. I'm probably going to go back and listen because I did not have my notepad and stuff with me, and I'm sitting here like, I need to be taking some of these notes.
Right.
So I'm going to come back. Thank you for having me. It was great.
Thank you. And where can we find you at, Eva?
Thank you for having me. This was a good time. I have learned a lot, like a whole lot. So if I got to take these kids back, here we go. I'm going to watch this over again. But you can find me complaining about politics on Twitter. That's pretty much what Twitter is for. So that's SocaMomDC on Twitter. On Instagram, I'm at SocaMom. I pretty much I post every now and then, but it's mostly stories, and you get to watch what I'm going to eat for breakfast. That's as exciting as it gets. On my website is socamom.com, and I have a group for homeschoolers. I don't know whose ears are sensitive, but it's called Regular Ass Homeschoolers. As you may know, I was traditionally schooled. I traditionally homeschooled, but I didn't take myself too seriously. I just kind of focused on what the kids might need and how I can get through it without losing my mind. So we have a group on Facebook called Regular Ass Homeschoolers. There's 2 of them, one that's mostly my friends and one that is more formal. And still, we provide information and free resources, and there's a lot of really great homeschool moms that have been doing it for a while. There's a combination of new moms. So that's us on Facebook.
Thank you. I'm joining both of your groups. Okay, I want to
because we're friends now.
really talk about like
we're friends.
So thank you everyone for joining us and speaking with me. I really enjoyed this panel and I learned a lot from each one of you. So that was really helpful to me as well. So you can find me at Taishia Shante pretty much anywhere on the internet. And my website is specifically taishiashante.com, has all of my writing portfolio. You can see all of my work there. You basically can just read my articles, me yelling about self-directed education because I'm obsessive about it. So that's about it. And we'll turn it back over to you, Tomi. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for being here. I've learned so much. I like have it stored in my head for when I'm going through this journey one day. So thank you guys, each and every one of you, for being here. And this is just the beginning. We're not even halfway through the week. Wednesday, we have a conversation about navigating special education for parents who have kids with disabilities and needs, and that will be with a special education teacher, an occupational therapist, and a special education rights lawyer. So you'll be able to ask your questions about that. Then on Thursday, it's like the big question everyone has about how do you juggle work and your kids' school demands. And that will be with mom coach Stefa LaFond, a peak performance strategist named Shamika Braithwaite, and an HR professional named Tessa Jenkins. And then on Friday, it's about navigating your kids' emotional health and well-being. So dealing with their anxiety on top of your anxiety or the emotional issues that are coming up with this time. And we have child play therapist Malia Siegel, positive discipline advocate Chrissy Coggins. And yeah, I'm really excited about what the rest of the week holds. So I hope you guys can join us for the events that we have coming up. And thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Go to bed.
Bye.
Thanks, you guys.
All right, bye everyone. Thank you.